Hi, this is Module 6, Video 4. In this video, we're going to build our exercise view model. So we already have the exercise view model stubbed out as part of the previous video, but we don't have a unit test fixture yet, so I will add that now. Now, we did make a little bit of a start on the public API in the previous video, again because we needed it. So we've got this model property here. I'm going to change that to be get only, and I'm going to add the rest of the public API that we're going to need. That's it for the public API. Obviously these couple of properties here are pretty self-explanatory. They're just going to return values from the model. IsActive I think will be useful in the view to highlight the currently active exercise, or perhaps to kind of dim the other exercises that are not active. And this progress property will give the amount of time that has been spent in this exercise, if any. I might actually put that after the duration. So first of all, let me write some basic tests around the really simple stuff here. Okay, so there's a couple of tests around the simple stuff. The constructor throws if the model's null. The name property on our view model gives us, whatever name was given to the model, and likewise for the duration. So let me make sure those tests fail. I've currently got this leftover code here, which is no longer correct, so I'm just going to comment that out for now. Okay, so not only do we have the expected failures here, mostly, there's one success. Because when we've got a duration of 0, we're going to get back a matching duration. But everything else is failing, and also some of our previous tests that we're passing are now failing because we've removed that, the logic here, this logic. So that's fine. So let's implement this basic stuff. Okay, cool. So now everything's passing. So now we need to test this progress and IsActive properties. Now, both of these are going to require knowledge of the execution context, because in order to figure out how much progress you've made, you need to know the current exercise progress, which is currently exposed through the execution context. In order to know whether you're active or not, you also need to know what the current exercise is, which is also exposed through the execution context. Now, we could have our exercise program view model set these properties through some internal behavior as it progresses through the exercise program, but there's not quite clean separation of concerns there. So I think I'd rather have the exercise view model know about the execution context, and it can base its calculation of these properties based on that. And of course the execution context can change, and we don't want to have to recreate the exercise view models every time the execution context changes. So it would be better if it took an observable of execution context so that it can reactively update these two properties. But before we get to that, well, actually, the one part of that I will add here is the public API aspect so that we can write a test for it. And then what I'll do now is write the test for this new property, this new parameter here, and the progress and isActive properties. Okay, so here's the tests I have. Quite a few around progress because it's not entirely trivial. So first of all, progress should be 0 if there's no execution context. Pretty self-explanatory. Progress is 0 if there's no progress being made through the exercise. So in this case, our system under test, which is the exercise view model, is using model 2, but the execution context is using model 1, and it's adding progress to model 1. So we expect the progress through our view models to still be 0. The next test, progress reflects any progression through the exercise. In this case, the model used by the exercise view model is the same model being used by the execution context. So therefore they're matching, and any progress through the execution context should be reflected in our view model. Next, progress is not reset to 0 if another exercise is started. This one's a bit subtle, but if you think about what happens what's going to happen in our view when we get to the end of an exercise, it's going to move on to the next exercise, and we don't really want the progress of the previous one to reset back to 0, because if we want to show an activity bar or something, we don't want it to kind of show them the user that they've not actually done that exercise. So it's not entirely clear to me yet whether that's going to be a real issue or not. It really depends on the view, whether the view wants to show the activity view for previously completed exercises or not. But we may as well make it behave in a way that makes sense. So that's what we're testing there. Progress is reset to 0 if the execution context changes. That's also kind of important, that if you click back, skip forwards or skip backwards, or you stop the exercise program entirely, and then come back to it, the progress should have reset to 0. Is active is false if there's no execution context. Pretty self-explanatory. True if the exercise is the current exercise. So if the model in use by our view model is the same as the one in use by the execution context, then we want to see is active as true. And conversely, if that's not the case, we want to see it as false. So those are the tests. Let me try them. Got a constructor problem here because we have not updated our existing exercise program view model to pass through the observable execution context like that. Okay, so the tests that we were expecting to fail are failing, so that's cool. So now we can take a look at the implementation. I think I'm going to start with the isActive implementation first, because I think we can use that to build our progress implementation. Hey, I've just spent the last hour or so trying to figure out how to do the progress implementation, because my initial attempt failed and I couldn't figure out why. So I went through a few iterations, and I'm probably going to cut them out because not much point leaving them in. But I wanted to show you what I kind of arrived at and what I thought would work, and why it doesn't, to the best of my knowledge anyway. So what I started with was monitoring the isActive property in this class, combined with the current exercise progress. And if we're active, then we can return the current exercise progress. Otherwise, I kind of return this null as a nullable time span, and then filter it out. So effectively, returning null here means that nothing will propagate to the property, which is what we want, because when the exercise changes, we want to leave whatever value was there previously. It's only when the context itself changes that we want to reset back to 0. So I thought that would work, but it didn't. So I switched out the use of isActive to this. So I'm actually looking up the current exercise and then comparing it against the current model. And only if that matches, then we return the current exercise progress observable. The current exercise progress time span. Otherwise, we do exactly what I said before. But that also doesn't work. And I spent a good while tracking this down, trying to figure out what the heck was going on. What I was expecting, of course, is that when we call set current exercise, the current exercise property would trigger an update before the current exercise progress property here, because the current exercise progress property is dependent upon the current exercise. So you wouldn't expect this to change until this changes, which is indeed the case, but for whatever reason this was being called with the previous current exercise and the new current exercise progress, which was 0. So this was still matching, and therefore it was setting the current exercise progress to 0 for this exercise, even though it shouldn't have been. Now, the way I found around that is a bit of a hack, but it's to basically check against the current exercise in the execution context instead, which is, it reflects the correct value of the current exercise, even though this doesn't. And I have no idea why this doesn't. I also tried using reactive extensions directly, using the combine latest operator, but the same behavior was present there, so I assume when any value is dependent upon that, so that's why it doesn't work in either case. I might try and put together a standalone repro for that, for this problem afterwards, but for now I'm just going to leave this hack in, and with this in place all the tests are passing, as you can see. So that's it for our exercise view model, and that's actually it, the last view model that we'll be writing. So the next video will just be a summary of what we've done in this module. So I'll catch you then.